Picture this: a long conference table, a room full of people who have spent their careers learning how to be seen. The talkers are talking. The performers are performing. Someone is making a joke. Someone is making a point. Someone is making sure their voice carries to the corners of the room. And at the far end of the table sits one person who has said nothing the entire meeting. No notes typed loudly. No nodding for show. Just stillness. A kind of stillness that does not read as absence. A kind of stillness that, the longer it lasts, begins to bend the gravity of the room toward it. By the end of the meeting, you will not remember most of what the talkers said. You will remember that one quiet person at the end of the table. You will remember the weight of them. You will remember, more than anything, what you projected onto them. The certainty that they were the smartest one in the room, or the most dangerous one in the room, or both, without them ever having confirmed it. They did not announce themselves. They simply refused to dilute themselves, and the rest of the room felt it. This is not a personality type. This is not introvert versus extrovert. This is something the deepest students of human nature have known for centuries and that almost no one understands today, because we live in a culture that mistakes noise for power and visibility for value. What we are going to do over the next half hour is take that mistake apart, piece by piece, and replace it with something far older and far more accurate. Because once you see how the quiet ones actually operate, what they can serve, what they refuse, what they wield, and what they choose not to wield, you will understand why they unsettle every room they walk into, including the ones full of people far louder, far more credentialed, and far more visible than they are. Let's begin with the obvious question. Why does silence feel dangerous at all? On the surface, it should not. A quiet person is not threatening anyone. They are not raising their voice. They are not making demands. They are not advancing, accusing, posturing. By every visible measure, they are doing less than everyone else in the room. So why does the room respond to them as if they were doing more? The answer is in the architecture of the human mind. We are pattern matchers and threat detectors above all else, and one of the oldest threat heuristics we carry, older than language, older than civilization, encoded into us by evolution itself, is the heuristic of unreadability. We trust what we can predict. We relax around what we can interpret. The moment we cannot read another person, cannot tell what they are thinking, cannot anticipate their next move, cannot map their reactions onto a familiar pattern, the threat system activates. Not because they are doing something hostile, but because they are doing nothing legible. And nothing legible to the ancient brain is a black box. And a black box to the ancient brain is a creature whose intentions you do not know, which is the single most dangerous kind of creature there is. The loud person hands you a complete map of themselves within 30 seconds. You know what they care about because they told you. You know what they fear because they revealed it. You know how to flatter them because they showed you what they hunger for. You know how to wound them because they pointed at the wound while telling you about it. The loud person is fully read, fully filed, fully understood, and therefore fully manageable. Their power is on the table where everyone can see it, which means everyone can also calculate around it. The quiet person hands you nothing. Their power is not on the table. It is held back, contained, undisplayed, which means you cannot calculate around it because you do not know what it is. And the moment a room contains a person whose true capacity is unknown, every other person in that room begins, consciously or not, to assume that capacity is greater than their own. Not because it is, but because the unknown has always, in the long arithmetic of evolution, been safer to overestimate than to underestimate. We are descended from the ones who treated the silent stranger as potentially formidable. The ones who did not are not here to discuss it. There is something even more specific happening, though, and this is where psychology enters the picture in a way that surface-level commentary rarely reaches. When a person stays silent in a context where speech is expected, the unconscious of every other person in the room begins to do something extraordinary. Fills the silence, not with sound, with projection, with imagined content, with assumptions about what that silence must contain. And what each person fills the silence with is not random. It is precisely what they themselves are most preoccupied by. The insecure person fills the silence with judgment, certain the quiet one is judging them. The competitive person fills the silence with rivalry, certain the quiet one is calculating an angle. The unsteady person fills the silence with critique, certain the quiet one has seen through them. The quiet person did not put any of this there. The room put it there and then handed authorship to the silent one. This is the mechanism by which the quiet acquire power without ever lifting a finger. The room does the work. The room writes the script of the silent one's danger, the silent one's intelligence, the silent one's depth, the silent one's threat, and then, having written it, the room responds to its own creation. The loud person spends enormous energy trying to construct an impression of themselves in others' minds. The quiet person spends almost none because the room is doing it for them and doing it more powerfully than the loud person could ever orchestrate. Consider a quiet name from the long story of human achievement, and the version of him that history wants you to remember is wrong. The reclusive figure who built one of the most influential bodies of work of the 20th century while almost never giving interviews, almost never appearing in public, almost never speaking about his own ideas. Most people interpret that withdrawal as eccentricity, as social inability, as some private wound that kept him from the world. But there is another reading, and the longer you sit with it, the more accurate it becomes. The withdrawal was not a flaw in his career. The withdrawal was the engine of his career. Every interview he refused became another vessel for the public to fill with their own imagination of who he was. Every appearance he declined deepened the mystique. The fewer artifacts he left of his ordinary, human, fallible self, the more space remained for people to construct him into the figure their psyche needed him to be. He did not need to perform genius. The absence of his performance left a vacuum into which the audience poured the conviction of his genius. And the conviction, once poured, took on a life of its own. This is not a trick the loud can replicate, no matter how sophisticated their strategy. Because the moment you speak, you give the audience information, and information closes the imaginative space. The quiet ones win the room not by saying brilliant things, but by leaving brilliant things unsaid, which the room then assumes are there. And that assumption, repeated across enough rooms, becomes reputation. And reputation, repeated across enough years, becomes power. Now let's get specific about what the quiet ones are doing that the loud ones never are, because the danger we are talking about is not just about perception. It is also about capacity. There is a real and measurable difference in what a person who has spent years cultivating silence can actually do, compared to a person who has spent those same years cultivating their voice. The first thing the quiet ones are doing is the work the loud ones cannot do, because they have not been quiet long enough to do it. They are observing, not glancing, not noting, observing in the deep sense, the sustained, undistracted attention that picks up the things almost no one else picks up. The micro-expression that flashes across a face for 1/5 of a second when a question lands somewhere the speaker did not want it to land. The slight delay in a response that signals the answer has been pre-rehearsed. The exact moment someone shifts from speaking honestly to speaking strategically. The pattern in a room's body language that reveals who actually holds the authority, regardless of who is officially in charge. These signals exist in every interaction. They are present in every meeting, every conversation, every negotiation. But they are detectable only by attention that is not divided, and the loud person's attention is always divided, because part of their cognitive bandwidth is permanently allocated to monitoring their own performance. How am I coming across? Did that land? What should I say next? Am I being clear? Am I being liked? This is the parasitic process running in the background of every loud mind, and it siphons off exactly the attention that would otherwise be available for reading the room. The loud person sees only the surface. The quiet person, freed from the burden of performing, sees the entire layer beneath it. A specific cognitive principle is at work here, and it is worth naming because it explains so much. The brain has finite attentional resources. There is a real, measurable ceiling on how much information it can process at once, and that ceiling cannot be lifted by willpower or talent. It can only be reallocated. The person who spends their attention on transmission has, by definition, less of it left for reception. The person who spends their attention on reception has, by definition, more of it available for understanding. And understanding, repeated long enough, becomes something the loud person never accumulates and the quiet person accumulates without effort, a quality the depth psychologies have always called insight, and that the strategic traditions have always called intelligence in its original sense. The capacity to gather and integrate information that others miss. Across the centuries, the same observation appears, dressed in different vocabularies. The leaders who survived the longest in dangerous courts were never the talkers. They were the ones who let others reveal themselves first. The negotiators who consistently extracted the best terms were the ones who waited longer than was comfortable before responding. The strategists whose moves seemed prescient in retrospect were the ones whose silence in meetings had been gathering data that no one else had bothered to gather. This is not mysticism. This is what attention produces when it is not constantly squandered on the performance of presence. The second thing the quiet ones are doing is conserving something that the loud are bleeding out of themselves without realizing it. Call it psychic force, call it inner energy, call it whatever term works for you. The thing matters more than the name. There is a real and finite quantity of internal force that a person possesses, and every act of expression, every defensive reaction, every justification, every emotional engagement with the noise of the world draws from the same reservoir. The loud person is in constant outflow. They are spending themselves into every conversation, every argument, every petty exchange, every small drama. By the end of the day, they are depleted, and the depletion shows in their reactivity, in their thinning patience, in the gradual hollowing out that everyone notices in them around their 40th birthday and that no one quite knows how to name. They have been pouring themselves into the world for so long that there is less and less left to pour. The quiet person does not have this problem. They are not in constant outflow. Their force is gathered, contained, available, which means that when they do choose to act, they bring to that action the full reserve of what others have already squandered. The quiet person who speaks once in a meeting after listening for an hour brings more force to that single sentence than the loud person brings to 1,000. The quiet person who finally decides to push back on something carries the gathered weight of every pushback they restrained. The quiet person who acts when action is necessary moves with a kind of consolidated power that the chronically active simply cannot replicate, because they have already spent the inner material that power requires. This is one of the oldest principles in the strategic traditions of every culture that ever had one. Restraint multiplies force at the moment of expression. Acting only when necessary makes the action when it arrives carry the weight of all the restraint behind it. The loud generals lost battles. The patient ones won them. The same physics applies to a life. The person who lives with constant emotional reactivity exhausts themselves into impotence. The person who lives with conserved containment arrives at every consequential moment fully resourced. If this is resonating with you, if you are starting to feel the truth of it land in some quiet place inside you, Take 1 second right now and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell while you're there. The work we do here is for the ones who already suspect they are not built for the world's noise, who already feel the pull towards something deeper and stranger, who already sense that the path to real power runs in the opposite direction from where everyone else is running. If that is you, then this is your channel. The third thing the quiet ones are doing is something almost no one has the patience to do. They are letting the world's pressure to react simply pass through them, again and again and again, until the muscle of reaction itself has weakened and the muscle of non-reaction has grown strong enough to take its place. This is harder than it sounds. The pressure to react is one of the most powerful forces the social environment ever produces. You feel it as a physical sensation in your chest, in your throat, in the tightening of your jaw when someone says the thing that demands a response. The biological imperative is to respond. The cultural imperative is to respond. Everything inside and outside you is telling you to respond. And the quiet person, day after day, year after year, simply does not. This is not suppression. Suppression would be the loud person silently storing every unreleased reaction, building toward an eventual explosion, which is what most chronically agreeable people are unknowingly doing. The quiet person has not suppressed the reaction. They have processed it internally in the moment with full awareness of what they are feeling and full clarity about what is causing it. And then, having processed it, they have simply chosen not to externalize it. The pressure rises, is felt, is understood, and is allowed to pass without action. And the more times this happens, the more the nervous system learns that the pressure to react is not the same as a need to react. They become two separate things. The pressure can rise to full intensity, and the person can remain unmoved because they have learned at the deepest level of their being that the pressure was never actually demanding anything. The pressure was just pressure, and pressure that meets no surface to push against eventually exhausts itself, while the person it was trying to move remains exactly where they were. There is a precise psychological term for the state this produces, and it is one of the most important capacities a human being can develop. It is called emotional non-reactivity, and the studies that have examined it consistently find that the people who possess it occupy a different category of effectiveness in almost every domain. Negotiation outcomes are better. Long-term relationships are more stable. High-pressure decisions are more accurate. Strategic moves are more effective. The reason is mechanical. A person whose internal state is not yanked around by the external environment retains access to the full range of their cognitive capacities at exactly the moments other people lose access to theirs. The loud person, when activated emotionally, becomes measurably less intelligent. The quiet person, having decoupled their internal state from the external environment, becomes no less intelligent than they were a moment ago. And in any high-stakes situation, the person who can still think when everyone else has stopped thinking is the person who wins. Consider how this plays out in a specific scenario. Two people are sitting across from each other in a negotiation. One of them is good. The other is great. The good one has prepared, knows the material, knows the strategy, knows the leverage points. The great one knows all of that and one additional thing. The great one knows that the moment they become emotionally engaged with the outcome, their judgment will degrade. So the great one walks into the room having already accepted whatever the result will be. They are not invested in a particular outcome. They are present, they are sharp, they are reading every signal, but their nervous system is not in the room. Their nervous system is at home, calm, unconcerned with this meeting. And because of that, when the other side makes a move designed to provoke or pressure, the great one does not react. The provocation hits nothing. The pressure finds no surface. And the good one, watching this, begins to lose their composure because their nervous system was in the room and the absence of the expected response from the other side has destabilized them. Now the great one is operating at full capacity and the good one is operating at 60%. The outcome is predetermined from that moment forward. It was decided by who could remain unreactive longer, and that question was answered before the meeting began. This is what the quiet ones do, not because they are cold, not because they do not feel. They feel everything. They feel more than the loud do because their attention is not divided. They simply have learned not to translate every feeling into immediate expression. And that single, almost invisible discipline produces effects in their lives that no amount of effort or talent can produce in the lives of those who lack it. Now let's go deeper, because we have been looking at what the quiet ones do externally, and there is something happening internally that is even more consequential. There is a phenomenon that occurs in the inner life of someone who has spent years in conscious quiet, and it is the source of nearly everything else we have been describing. It is the slow, patient assembly of an inner center, an unmoving core inside the psyche that becomes the reference point for every external interaction. The loud person does not have this. The loud person has no inner center, which is precisely why they need so much external noise, to keep filling the empty space where the center should be. The quiet person, year after year, builds something where the emptiness was. And once that something exists, the entire game changes. You can feel the difference when you encounter a person who has it. Their attention does not flit. Their attention rests. They are not scanning the environment for cues about how to feel about themselves. They are simply present in a way that is increasingly rare in this culture and that registers when you encounter it as something close to gravitational. You find yourself wanting to be near them. You do not entirely know why. They have not been particularly warm. They have not flattered you. They have not performed any of the social rituals you are used to receiving. But there is something stable in them, and your nervous system, exhausted by the unstable nervous systems of everyone else, finds itself drawn to that stability the way a body in cold finds itself drawn to a fire. This is what is meant when older traditions speak of presence as a capacity rather than a quality. Presence is not personality. Presence is not charisma. Presence is the residue of years spent constructing an inner center while everyone else was spending those years dispersing themselves. And the residue is, for all practical purposes, unfakeable. You can copy the surface behaviors of a person with real presence, the slowness, the restraint, the long pauses, and you will produce an exact aesthetic imitation that fools no one for very long, because the inner condition is not there. The aesthetic of stillness without the substance of stillness reads as performance, and people pick up on it within minutes. The substance of stillness reads as power, and people pick up on that within seconds. The construction of this inner center is the deepest work a human being can do, and it is the project that the loud life forecloses. You cannot build an inner center while constantly turning outward to manage the room. You cannot construct stability while every reaction is being externalized in real time. The work requires the precise condition that the modern world makes hardest to maintain: sustained, undistracted attention to your own inner experience, returned to again and again, day after day, year after year. It is patient work. It is invisible work, produces nothing showable in the short term. And it is also the only work that produces the kind of person we are talking about. Every shortcut is fake. Every shortcut shows. There is something else the quiet ones cultivate, and it is the rarest capacity of all in this current moment of history. They cultivate the capacity to be misunderstood without correcting it. This sounds simple. It is one of the hardest disciplines a person can learn. The reflexive urge to clarify, to explain, to make sure the other person has the right picture of you is so deeply rooted in the social mammal we are that almost no one notices how much of their behavior is governed by it. We feel the wrong impression forming in someone else's mind and we cannot bear it. We rush to correct it. We over-explain. We add context. We laugh nervously and lighten what was being misread. We exhaust ourselves trying to be properly understood by people whose understanding of us was never going to be possible and never going to matter. The quiet ones have abandoned this. Not because they do not care what people think of them, they care, they are human, but because they have noticed something the loud have not. The act of correcting a misunderstanding is itself a form of submission to the misunderstanding. It accepts the premise that the other person's accurate picture of you is something you are responsible for producing. The quiet ones have rejected that premise. They have accepted that some people will misread them, possibly forever, and that the energy required to correct every misreading would consume the entire life that the correct reading was supposed to validate. So they let it go. They let people be wrong about them. They let the false stories circulate. They allow themselves to be perceived as cold when they are not cold, as arrogant when they are not arrogant, as distant when they are simply not interested in proving they are close. And in releasing the need to be properly understood by everyone, they gain something far more valuable than universal understanding ever was. They gain the energy that would have gone into the correcting. They gain the dignity of letting their actual life, over time, speak for whatever truth about them is real. And they gain the strange protection that comes from being someone whose response to a false story is silence. A protection so effective that, eventually, the false stories stop because spreading a story about a person who will not engage with it produces no satisfaction for the spreader, and the stories die from lack of feedback. This is one of the most overlooked sources of the quiet one's power. Not the cleverness of their responses, the absence of their responses. The world, finding no traction for its narratives about them, eventually stops generating those narratives, and the quiet one is left with what they always wanted, the freedom to simply be, without having to perform their own definition into the minds of every audience. We need to be honest, though, about what this costs, because everything we have described so far makes the quiet life sound like an unambiguous advantage, and it is not. There is a steep price, and the quiet ones pay it without complaint, but they pay it. Let's be clear about what it actually costs to become the kind of person we are describing, so that no one walks into this thinking it is a free upgrade. The first cost is the loneliness of being unreadable. The same quality that gives the quiet ones their power in any room also keeps most rooms from ever truly knowing them. People do not approach the unreadable for casual connection. They approach them with caution, sometimes with admiration, often with curiosity, but rarely with the easy intimacy that the loud receive automatically. The loud are surrounded. The quiet are kept at a respectful distance, even by people who care about them. This is not always a bad thing. Distance is what conserves the inner work. But it does mean that the quiet person often spends large portions of their life without the kind of immediate, frictionless social belonging that other people take for granted. They are admired more than they are companioned. They are sought out for what they offer more than for who they are. And the people who do reach them, who do penetrate the silence and become real to them, are few, sometimes very few. That is a price. The second cost is the steady stream of misinterpretation. When you stop correcting the false stories about you, the false stories do not always go away politely. Sometimes they harden into reputation. Sometimes the cold reading becomes the official reading and follows you for years. Some doors that would have opened for the more legible person never open for the quiet one, because the people on the other side of those doors have made up their minds about who you are based on inputs you refuse to provide. You will lose opportunities you would have had. You will be passed over for things you deserved. You will watch people of vastly inferior capacity advance past you because they were willing to do the social work you would not do. That is a price. The third cost is the slow erosion of the connections that depended on your noise. The friendships built on shared reactivity. The relationships sustained by the constant emotional exchange that you have now stopped providing. The professional networks lubricated by chatter and gossip and the easy availability you have now withdrawn. All of this thins. Not all at once, slowly over months and years, but it thins. The people who were attached to your performance leave when the performance ends, because they were never attached to you. The people who were attached to your reactivity leave when the reactivity ends, because they needed it for their own purposes. What remains eventually is a much smaller circle of people who were attached to whatever the actual core of you was. And that circle, for most of the quiet ones, is significantly smaller than the social surface they used to maintain. That is also a price. These are real costs, and there is something the modern world rarely acknowledges, which is that real costs are real. They are not magically dissolved by the rewards. The rewards of the quiet life are immense, and we will get to them, but they coexist with the costs, not in place of them. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. The honest answer is that the quiet path produces a specific kind of life, and that life is not for everyone, and the people for whom it is not for would be wise to not pretend otherwise. The loud have their own gifts. The loud have their own access. There is no superiority hierarchy operating here. There is only the question of which trade you are willing to make, and the trade the quiet have made is real, and it is not free. But for the ones who do make the trade, for the ones who walk into the loneliness and the misinterpretation and the slow thinning of the social surface, and keep walking, something forms that does not exist anywhere else in human experience. Something rare enough that history remembers, with strange persistence, the people who built it. They are the ones whose names outlast their lifetimes. They are the ones whose ideas reshape the world from rooms most of their contemporaries never knew they were in. They are the ones who, generation after generation, get rediscovered, get reinterpreted, get held up as examples of something the noisy times had forgotten was possible. The quiet life produces this, and only the quiet life produces this. The loud life produces influence within its moment. The quiet life produces influence across centuries. And the trade-off between those two outcomes is the trade-off every person has to make consciously or unconsciously about what they want their existence to be when measured against the long arc of time. So here is what the quiet ones know that the loud will never understand, and it is the thing this whole video has been building toward. Power is not what you do in the moment. Power is what accumulates inside you over years of choosing not to do, again and again, when everything in the environment is demanding that you do. Every time you do not react when reaction is expected, a tiny deposit is made in an account that compounds. Every time you do not explain when explanation is demanded, a tiny deposit is made. Every time you do not perform when performance is being requested of you, a tiny deposit is made. The deposits are invisible. They produce no immediate return. For the first years, the account looks like nothing. There is no visible payoff, no obvious advantage. Nothing to show for the relentless and unglamorous discipline of restraint. And then, and this is the part that almost no one believes until they have lived it, the account compounds. The compounded years begin to produce returns that no amount of activity can match, because the returns are coming from a place that activity could never reach. The compounded years produce presence. They produce gravity. They produce the kind of person who walks into a room and changes the air. They produce the silent one at the end of the conference table, whose stillness the entire room bends toward without anyone having said a word. And the rest of the room, the loud and the performing and the visibly busy, will never quite understand what they are looking at when they look at that person. They will assume talent. They will assume luck. They will assume some advantage that they themselves were denied. They will be wrong on every count. What they are looking at is the accumulation of 1,000 silences, 10,000 non-reactions, 100,000 small choices to gather rather than to spend. That is the danger of the quiet ones. Not anything they do, the unimaginable thing they have not done, and the inner mountain that has built itself from the absence. If something in this reached you, If you felt the truth of it press on a part of you that the noise usually drowns out, do not let this be just another video you watched. Let it be the first deposit. The next time the world demands a reaction from you, do not give it. The next time someone wants to drag you into the noise, stay where you are. The next time you feel the pressure rise inside your chest, telling you to speak, to defend, to perform, let it pass. Watch what happens to it when it meets no surface to push against. Watch what begins to gather inside you when you stop spending yourself into the world. The work is patient, the returns are slow, and the destination is a kind of self that the loud spend their whole lives chasing and never reach. Subscribe if you want more of this. The next video continues into the territory just past where this one ends, into the strange psychology of what happens when you become the unreadable one in your own life. I will see you there.